cross-examination of Agent Sedwick, and he has now passed the witness over to the defense. Mr. Watson, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
You may.
Agent Sedwick, I'm Mark Watson, and we talked this morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
You've been with the FBI for how long, since 1998?
23 years, yes, sir.
23 years. And during that period, did you, is it fair to say you've done a lot of things inside the FBI?
Yes, sir. Besides an investigator, I've been a SWAT team member, breacher for 20 years.
And are you pretty familiar with the investigative techniques that the FBI has used or used in law enforcement and or prosecution in your time there?
I mean, I'm familiar with most of it. I wouldn't say I'm intimately familiar, but I know what we do to investigate cases, yes, sir.
In the first 10 years you were there, you were in school a whole lot, I guess, right? Or what did I say, training?
Off and on, yes, sir.
Okay. And you've taken classes on how to testify in front of a jury, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many times do you think you've testified before? Yes.
Over 80 times, sir.
Okay. Your conclusions, can they be affected by buildings, topography, obstructions, or whether or not a phone call was made inside or outside of the building?
Yes, sir. All that can affect the coverage area of a tower, but that's what the engineers do. They design the network, and that's part of my training to understand how that but how that affects the coverage area of a cell tower.
Okay. And did you run this data through a program?
Yes, sir, through mapping software.
And what's the name of the software?
It's Gladiator Forensics is the company.
So you take the raw data and you enter it into, what's the name of the software?
ESPA.
Vespa?
ESPA. ESPA.
So you plug it in there and then it comes out with the, do you do the maps or does the program do the maps?
I do the maps, sir. It plots everything for me and hand draws the sectors, but I will also take my data, run it through a different mapping software to make sure there's not a mapping software issue. We have a peer review where another cast agent will review my work to make sure there's not a mapping issue. They'll use a separate mapping software, and when I first started, I did it by hand.
One bit of software did the data crunching, and then you using different software did the mapping, I guess, close to that? Is that close to accurate?
No, sir. I use one mapping software that plots everything. Then I use either when a peer review is conducted, another cast agent will take that data, use a different mapping software to check my work to make sure there were no errors, there were no mapping errors. And in this case, I also did that review myself.
And what was that agent's name that reviewed your work?
I don't remember. I'm blanking on who did this one because I sent several things out for peer review recently, and I don't remember, sir.
All right. Would you agree that some scientific theories formerly used by law enforcement at one time are no longer used?
Yes, sir. There's been stuff that, yes, sir.
For instance, hair follicle, is that an example?
Yes, sir. That's one.
And the FBI that was pretty extensively used, correct?
In my career, I've never used hair follicle.
But do you know whether or not it was used quite a bit?
I don't know how much was used. I know it was used, sir. I don't know to the extent it was used.
Okay. Do you know if it was ever used by the FBI?
Yes, sir. I know it was.
Okay. What about bite mark evidence?
I don't know if the Bureau ever used bite mark evidence. That's another thing I've never used.
Okay. Are you aware whether or not that bite mark evidence used to be used quite a bit?
I know it was used, yes, sir.
And it's no longer used, correct?
I believe it's not used.
I mean, to the best, I'm not asking you a perfect question, but you, to your knowledge, is no longer used, correct?
That is my understanding, sir, but I do not know.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Ignacio?
Yes, Judge, thank you. Judge, may I ask the witness to step down?
Yes, you can sit down.